Hi, I'm Bronwyn Best, and I'm here with David Simpson to discuss the new ISO International Standard 37001 on anti-bribery management systems. You were part of this international group of experts that developed the ISO 37001. Can you tell me a bit about that experience and why it was felt to be important to develop such a standard?
Well, first it might be useful to provide a little bit of an overview of ISO and the standard itself. ISO, or the International Organization for Standardization, is a body that essentially serves as the platform for both developing and publishing international standards like ISO 9000 on quality or ISO 14000 on environmental systems. ISO's members include national standard bodies from more than 163 different countries, and its inclusive engagement and governance structure helps it maintain its special standing within the UN system and within other organizations or international bodies such as the WTO or the World Trade Organization. So when it's developing a standard on a particular subject, it invites subject matter experts from around the world to contribute to a standard which will essentially reflect global best practice. In the case of ISO 37001, some 59 countries participated, as well as a number of liaison institutions, which included organizations like the OECD, the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, as well as Transparency International. So why the need for this particular standard on anti-bribery? Well, we know that bribery and corruption continue to be a huge problem globally, with an estimated $1.5 trillion in bribes being paid annually. At the same time, prior to ISO 37000, there was no global standard to implement or evaluate an organization's anti-bribery program at an international scale. So the motivation for the standard was to help organizations to establish, implement, maintain, and improve their anti-bribery compliance program. And also to enable organizations to seek third-party certification, or just use it as a reference tool for international best practice.
So you've mentioned a bit about the development of the standard and provided a general background on it. But I'd like to know, why is ISO 37001 important for companies or other organizations, and what value would it have for them?
I think the value proposition for ISO 37001 falls into four primary areas. First, as a reference tool. The guidance can be used to establish new anti-bribery programs or improve existing ones. ISO 37001 builds on and complements well-known instruments that have long been referenced in the anti-bribery and anti-corruption space, such as the federal sentencing guidelines in the US, the good practice on internal controls, ethics and compliance from the OECD, business principles for countering bribery from Transparency International, and other rules from the International Chamber of Commerce, and increasingly new guidance stemming from the UK Bribery Act. So ISO 37001 consolidates these and other instruments and expands on them, making it, in my opinion, one of the most comprehensive reference tools out there on anti-bribery management systems. Second, in terms of value, it can be very useful as a benchmarking tool, as it permits an organization to know where it stands on anti-bribery in terms of best practice, and allows the organization to better understand what the value of its efforts are to fight bribery. So this is quite valuable. And with the standard being available in multiple languages, English, French, Arabic, I think it's Russian now, you know that the standard can be universal in its application, so that the message is the same throughout the organization, whether it be here or in its subsidiaries elsewhere. And so it serves as that assessment tool for others, especially for organizations with extensive business relationships around the world, as it allows the organization not only to assess itself, but also to assess its business partners throughout the world, whether they're in Miami or Mumbai, to make sure that they live by the same standard as the organization. This is important especially because organizations are increasingly being held accountable not just for their own internal actions, but also for the actions of these business partners, which could include suppliers, agents, dealers, consultants, their joint venture partners, essentially anyone who has a contractual relationship with the organization itself. And this is becoming very important. Finally, the standard and a commitment to implement it promotes transparency and enables organizations to demonstrate their commitment to anti-bribery and anti-corruption, to show others what it's doing to prevent bribery from occurring in its sphere of activities. This could be demonstrated to stakeholders, shareholders, its board of directors, and even to authorities in case there is an investigation. Many organizations will also opt to get certified so that they can objectively demonstrate that they have put in place adequate procedures and measures to detect and prevent bribery. This is an important factor in evaluating the organization's criminal liability if bribery does indeed occur. This also gives the governing body some peace of mind, knowing that the organization is indeed addressing its bribery risks in these areas.
I can understand that, but is it necessary for a company to be formally certified under this standard? Or is it enough that a company is aware of the standard and ensures that other organizations with which it works are also aware of the standard?
So I think organizations themselves are probably best placed to understand how they can get use out of the standard. Certainly organizations are not obligated to get certified. Some organizations may simply want to use a standard as a reference tool of best practice, and the standard provides a very good basis for this. Others may wish to test their systems, kick the tires as it were, to see if it meets international best practice, or find ways that it might improve its existing systems. Other organizations I know have used the implementation process to redesign their risk assessment protocols, to deepen their relationships with their business partners, which has then enabled them to get even more value from these relationships. What's certain is that organizations that get certified will know that their anti-bribery programs achieve a very high standard and that they meet best practice globally. And in addition, the process of certification itself also ensures that the organization has effectively documented its program. Some organizations like Microsoft or Walmart are using certification as a means to help risk-proof their businesses. And even governments, such as the governments of Singapore, Peru, now Malaysia, and some others, have an interest in adopting the ISO 37001 as part of their procurement procedures. And what this would do, this would mandate that any organization wanting to do business with those governments would therefore have to align their practices with the standard before they're eligible for procurement.
That's interesting. So some governments are encouraging organizations to take up the standard. In that light, what would you recommend that organizations do to become certified?
Well, before an organization approaches certification, it should ensure that it has its house in order. It can do this by reviewing the standard, making sure that their program aligns to the key requirements of the standard. This would include such elements as having a robust risk assessment process, having relevant policies and procedures and controls, ensuring a consistent tone from the top, and an effective compliance function, having communications and training, and also ensuring due diligence of its business associates. We can help conduct this, and we can help organizations with this. We also conduct a pre-certification readiness review, which would essentially highlight any areas which may need to be brought up to standard and ensure that the organization has met all the major requirements of the standard before embarking on the certification process itself. This would involve working closely with the client for the certification audit itself, helping them to prepare, going over procedures and helping them prepare for it. Of course, in situations where we would serve as consultants to the organization, it would have to be another entity that would serve as their certification auditors, as we couldn't play both roles, as this would create an obvious conflict of interest. But we're happy to play either role for our clients. Implementing ISO 37001 takes between 6 months to 18 months to put a whole system in place, depending on the complexity of the organization, while the certification process can take from 3 weeks to 3 months, again, depending on the complexity of the organization and its size. I guess one of the most important recommendations that I would make to companies considering certification would be to ensure that they're dealing with competent consultants and auditors who are experienced in anti-bribery management and are knowledgeable about the practices of other companies, especially in similar industries and geographies, as this tends to produce the most valuable and profitable exchanges with the company and its compliance team and management.
Thank you for your time, David.
Thank you very much, Brown. Very enjoyable.